The Assassin's Creed franchise has been around for a long time. In fact, my whole interest in history came from these games. This franchise is near and dear to my heart. I remember coming home from school, dishing my homework, and turning on my PS3 to play AC2 or Brotherhood. Ezio as a character is a staple in my childhood, along with Renaissance Italy, so this brings me to this video. Here we're going back in time all the way to 2009 to see if this game still holds up today. Is it the best Assassin's Creed game? How's the combat? Is the story still good? We'll answer these questions in the analysis video. Keep in mind, like I said, this game isn't new. This means I'll be lenient on certain gameplay mechanics, but that doesn't mean I'll totally disregard the game's faults. Also, it goes to mention I'll spoil everything related to the story. So, if you've never played the Ezio games, please just play them and then come back to this video. Unless you don't want to, that's totally fine. This video will summarize things for you. So with that being said, grab your popcorn, go follow the Twitch to engage in some interesting discussions about games and may possibly be included in a video, get a drink, and let's take a leap of faith straight into this video.
Silenzio! 22 years ago, I stood where I stand now and watched my loved ones die, betrayed by those I had called friends. Vengeance clouded my mind, would have consumed me, were it not for the wisdom of a few strangers who taught me to look past my instincts. They never preached answers, but guided me to learn from myself. We don't need anyone to tell us what to do. Not Savonarola, not the Medici. We are free to follow our own path. There are those who will take that freedom from us. Too many of you gladly give it. But it is our ability to choose whatever you think is true that makes us human. There is no book or teacher to give you the answers, show you the path. Choose your own way. Do not follow me or anyone else.
Kick off the story of Assassin's Creed 2, we're greeted with an opening sequence going through the events of the previous game. For those wondering why I'm not covering the first AC game, it's honestly because I just don't own the game, and I don't have an Xbox for backwards compatibility. I also have no idea if you can get it on PC, so, not to mention there's also some rumors about an AC1 remaster. I'm not sure if it's true, but I'll wait and see. To do a brief rundown of the previous game, the player took control of Altair ibn La'ahad, an assassin during the Third Crusade. There was also a storyline that took place during the present, where you took control of a character by the name of Desmond Miles. Desmond was taken into a facility owned by a company called Abstergo. Abstergo has this machine called the Animus that lets the user experience the memories of their ancestors. During this game, playing as Altair, we assassinate different people in order to regain the trust of the Brotherhood, as well as the master of the said Brotherhood, Al-Mualim. Long story short, we come across an artifact from the ones who came before, the Apple of Eden. The Templars, the ancient enemy of assassins, are the people who own Abstergo. They want to find the apple to gain complete control of humanity. They use the Animus as a tool to find that said apple, and that brings us to Assassin's Creed 2. As Desmond, we wake up to see lots of figures on the wall using eagle sense. These writings, we find out soon, are the writings from the Subject 16, a person who was in the same position as Desmond but went crazy because he was in the Animus for too long. Touching briefly on this, I love the mystery behind this subplot. This is by no means the overarching narrative behind the game, but it is something that lingers through the games that Desmond's in. You find out a lot about the lore through Subject 16, so I'll say that towards the end of the video. But suddenly a woman named Lucy greets us and tells us that she's in a hurry, and that she needs us to get into the Animus as quickly as possible. Apparently she has done some shit, and we have like about 10 minutes to do what she asked and get the hell out of Abstergo. It is a shame that we don't ever find out what she did, and why does she have blood on her that lasts the entire game and never changes her clothes. I do wish there was something here, but it isn't big a deal. Desmond agrees to do what she asks, and we get into the Animus. While in, we witness a woman give birth to one of the most influential characters in gaming, Ezio Auditore. Here we see Ezio's father come in, hold the baby and name him, and then we snap out of the Animus. During this segment, it's just scripted stealth sequence. Calling it a stealth sequence is being generous in all honesty. You have to really try to be caught in order to fail this prologue. I don't even think you can fail it, but who knows? Let me know in the comments below. While stealthing around, we see loads of Animus machines. This means that some people are going through the same things as Desmond. You aren't really told what these people are looking for. I wish the game did because this shit's super interesting. I think maybe they do later and I just didn't catch it. Desmond also learns the skill of eagle vision. This, in the terms of Desmond, isn't really important important narrative-wise, so I'm not going to touch on it. It's mostly just a gameplay mechanic. Soon after, we're introduced kind of to combat. Here, all that occurs is attacking enemies. You aren't introduced to dodging, countering, disarming, and so forth. For this moment though, and I will talk about it later, the combat feels incredibly dated. And I can't tell you the number of times where I was so bored on my mind battling enemies. I actively avoided encounters because of this. Keep that in the back of your mind. To speed things up, I'm going to bum rush through this prologue section. After battling the Abstergo men, we get into the trunk of a car and conceal ourselves. After a loading screen, we get out and walk around this huge factory with Lucy, the girl who was with us. As she explains everything that's been going on, Abstergo is going to replace their apple of Eden with a new one, and with a map that Ezio found shows the location of it. This means that we need to find the apple before they do. Regardless, we meet a couple of new faces, Sean Hastings and Rebecca Crane. They both are assassins. Rebecca's a nice tech guru who handles the intricacies of the Animus. Sean's a bruised dickhead who specializes in history and knowledge archiving. So, with greetings out of the way, we jump into the Animus. While in the Animus, we control Ezio in 1476 Renaissance Italy, specifically in Florence. During this time, Ezio has beef with a family called the Pazzi. Specifically, Ezio's family has beef with them. During this, another combat sequence that involves just fists, and like I said before, combat isn't a strong suit of this game. After beating literally everyone's ass, we get introduced to Ezio's brother Federico, and after this introduction we beat some more ass. Though I hate the combat in this game because it is super clunky and unrefined, I love the introduction of Ezio. You see him as this charming, charismatic, wise-ass dude, in other words, very likable. Connecting that, you get to see his motivations during this time. He's vengeful, he isn't serious about things, and he's brash and arrogant, enough to cause a character change through the playtime of the story. After the fight, Federico tells us to loot the bodies, essentially teaching us the mechanic even though I never looted a single body through the entirety of this game. It's just, you gain enough money as it is in the game. By the end, you will be rolling in currency. The only thing that this is good for is quickly and hopefully getting a quick throwing knife or some medicine when you're completely out. That's it. But you will find yourself never running out after upgrading your pouch fully. You'll just keep refilling the pouch whenever you have free time. Speaking of buying things, the next thing on the list is to talk to the doctor in order to get some medicine for Ezio's face. This just teaches you how to buy certain products from vendors. This is nothing really complicated, and it is a nice addition to the second game from the first. But after we possibly get the most influential title screen ever in video games, we raced Ezio's brother to the top of a building, and after winning, we get this beautiful scene. This thing is just so iconic. When Ezio's theme plays, I get goosebumps all over my body. Incredible. Regardless, we take a leap of faith and hide in a haystack because Vieri Pazzi's men are looking for Ezio. Tutorial on how to become anonymous. It's pretty much a simplified version of GTA's mechanics hiding from the police. You can hide in haystacks, blend in with the crowd, simply run away, and other things. We'll get more in depth on this eventually. But this is when I'm going to talk about parkour in the game. The thing that Assassin's Creed is best known for. In AC2, this shit sucks so much ass, I shit you not. A lot of people think that AC2 to Revelations has the best parkour because of the intricacies behind it. No. This is the most glitchy, unpolished, and unrefined parkour system I have ever played. You constantly get stuck to walls when you don't want to. Ezio parkours the opposite way from where your analog stick is positioned, and sometimes Ezio just climbs shit when you didn't even give an input to climb. It's almost like this game anticipates you to parkour even though you aren't going to. This game has been the game I raged at the most in my entire existence on this earth. It is so god-awful that there were times I stopped a stream and recording because I couldn't take it anymore. You'll see these clips later in the video when these certain moments pop up. To go over how the system works, you have to press the right trigger as well as X on PlayStation to initiate the parkour mechanic. Seems simple enough, right? Well, things get really weird when you can still parkour without even touching the X button. This mostly happens when you're on rooftops. Say you're just simply jogging on the roof of Florence. It's so incredibly easy to accidentally run off the roof and fall to your death without even touching the X button or the circle button to descend. This may seem like something so little, but when you're doing the assassin tombs, oh my god, I've never been more infuriated in my life. Granted, this game is old. It was released back in 2009, but if it's infuriating to play now, I guarantee you that it was somewhat infuriating to play back then. I think I have PTSD now because of the constant white loading screens that pop up when you die. The bottom line is, at least in AC2, the parkour is complete ass. Worse than I remember is probably the best statement to make. Although this game is old and I will give it some leniency, this ultimately will have points taken off the board for this game. If your biggest feature of the game is broken, then most of your game is going to be fundamentally broken. Like I said, I'm not going to be too harsh on this game though. Regardless, we poorly parkour our way to Christina's house, Ezio's love interest. Pretty much Ezio claps some cheeks, wakes up the next morning to find Christina's father shouting at him, so we jump out the window and hide from the guards. From here, here, essentially the game takes you on some errands. Ezio's father tells him to deliver some letters. This pretty much gives you the time to get acclimated to the control system of parkouring across rooftops. Though I appreciate this to a high degree, the extra time doesn't really help. It only makes me more frustrated in time. But going back to a narrative lens, the letters that you deliver you can actually read. Ezio's father's letter details things about a person being guilty of a crime, something that has to do with betrayal. One of the families included in the letter was the Pazzi, meaning something weird's going on. When Ezio gets back, we meet with a man named Uberto. People who have played this game already know him far too well. When we first met him, you can clearly tell that this man's intentions may not be the best. During my playthrough of the game, the voice acting was weird, and I just couldn't understand what it was until later in the game. Ubisoft constantly puts reverb on characters' voices unnecessarily. It was always on a character's voice during every single cutscene. It was almost borderline annoying. Though this is a small gripe, it just felt lazy in all honesty. I'm not a sound designer, but it should be easy to toggle when reverb is on versus off depending on the scene that's shown. But after we meet with Uberto, Ezio's father tells us to do some more errands for our family. With Petruccio, we collect some feathers for him because I guess he's making something that is secret. Once again, getting us acclimated to parkour. With Claudia, we beat up a dude that's been cheating on her with another woman. Funny thing is, this man is in every Ezio game, and you beat him up in every one of those games, and it's kind of funny. And finally, with our mother Maria, we meet with the one and only Leonardo da Vinci. During this errand, we only really carry a box for Leonardo to a certain location while some small banter plays about Ezio's pastime of being with women. My man. But next is when things start to drag a bit. For our third time, you have to do more errands, once again getting you acclimated to parkour. We don't need 3 missions in a row to get us acclimated to a gameplay system. We at most need 2, and that's kind of pushing it. You'll find that this game will always feel repetitive, but I guess it comes with the territory of being an AC game as well as an Ubisoft game. Essentially, Ezio delivers messages to 3 people: a thief, some dude that's paranoid that we were followed, and we deliver a message via a pigeon coop. From the last person that we deliver a message to, it sounded like trouble's about to go down, and it has Ezio worried, and rightfully so, as we're about to witness something tragic. As we get back to Ezio's home, we see the entire thing just ransacked. Bookshelves pushed over, everything's a mess, and so forth. This has Ezio worried, of course, but all of a sudden, a woman tries to hit Ezio on the head, but it turns out to be a friend of his family, I think. She tells us that his father and brothers have been sent to jail. Ezio asks where his mother and sister is, and they come out of hiding. During this whole thing, it was very tragic for sure, seeing Ezio's mother in shock after being Ezio's father's captured and so forth. But through this whole thing, I was wondering, where in the hell is the music? You just hear footsteps and dialogue, which works, don't get me wrong. You don't need music in every cutscene to make a game great, but I feel like in this instance, a huge narrative moment, they should have added music to a certain degree. It is a small nitpick, but it can add to the emotion of the scene. But after finding out where his father is, Ezio makes his way to his father's location, at the Palazzo del Signoria. During this mission is when you get the stench of the Ubisoft stank. While parkouring your way to the top of the tower, you aren't allowed to be detected. This is a mission structure that is going to be relevant throughout the entirety of this game and during this decade. Starting from the late 2000s to the late 2010s, stealth games constantly use the can't be caught mission structure that everyone has grown to hate to a certain degree, especially Ubisoft games, as I have mentioned. At least in this mission, it wasn't all that bad, but in later missions, it is a damn hassle. It shouldn't be hard to just let the player decide which route they want to go, either stealth or loud and proud. Thankfully, in later entries, they lay off this trope quite a bit, but it's still there nonetheless. As we talk with Ezio's father, he tells us that he was expecting this type of thing, but not as soon. This causes some concern for Ezio, and he asks what exactly his father means. But evading the question, Giovanni says to go back to the house and look for a hidden door in the office, to use Ezio's gift to find it. We all know that this gift is Eaglevision. This is a pinnacle system used in every Assassin's Creed game. Within this hidden door is a chest that Ezio needs to take everything in, along with the letter we need to deliver to Uberto. Ezio hesitantly agrees and we go on our way. The one thing I will say about this sequence is that it's well paced. We first get introduced to our family, getting a relationship built. We get used to being Ezio, and as soon as we get used to everything, the game hands us a curveball with the mystery to uncover, and I love it. When we get through the hidden door and open the chest, a memorable scene plays. Ezio dons the assassin robes of his father. Along with it is a sword and a broken hidden blade. With intuition, we understand that Ezio's family comes from a long lineage of assassins, and one can assume that his father is in jail because of the sinister plot of the Templars. As we deliver the note to to Uberto, he tells us that everything was a misunderstanding and everything will be cleared up. But as he says this, a certain figure comes out of the shadows, looks at Ezio, and walks away. Automatically, we understand that Uberto may not be the best person. He even asks if Ezio wants to stay in his house. Of course, Ezio doesn't agree, and I love the setup of this eventual betrayal. It balances the player knowing what's going to happen and what Ezio thinks is going to happen. Ezio is young and oblivious. He will believe what most people tell him. This sets up an amazing character arc that spans this game and others in the series. Ezio says that he will meet Uberto at the main plaza where his parents would be released, but it turns out that Uberto betrayed Ezio's family. As players had expected, we see Ezio's father and brothers have nooses around their necks, with Uberto giving a speech on if Ezio's family is guilty or not. Uberto claims that he never got the documents that Ezio gave him that night before, and as you can see in the background, that same ominous figure that was at Uberto's house is here at the hanging. At this point, we can assume that these individuals are Templars conspiring to take down Giovanni as well as to take down his baking business, as you can read in the notes later on in the game. But all of a sudden, Ezio's father and brothers are killed in the hanging. When this happens, Ezio makes a mistake by running to the front of the crowd and yelling that he will kill Uberto. But when he does this, some hefty guards confront Ezio, which leads to Ezio understanding that he now needs to run. This initiates a running away sequence that is in abundance in this game, narrative driven or free roam driven. It's something that I love doing, but then again, the parkour is so unpolished to the point where I'll do whatever it takes not to run away. I'll just fight all of the guards even when the combat is extremely bare bones and boring, and I will get to combat when the time comes. After our escape, we meet with a woman named Paola, a woman who runs a brothel. Here, Ezio admits that he's going to go on his way and assassinate Uberto, but knowing that this will be a suicide for Ezio, Paola tells Ezio that she will teach him a couple of things. During this section, we learn the ins and outs of social stealth and pickpocketing. Social stealth is by far the best system in the game. You can hire certain factions to blend in with. This can be the courtesans, thieves, and mercenaries. I would say the best faction to use would be the courtesans because, for one, they will distract any guard that comes your way, anonymous or not. Other than this, there is also just your typical social stealth. Blend in with groups of people in the streets and you can sit on benches. Though I didn't use this system as much as I should have, when I did use them, they were the most helpful thing in this game by far. Pickpocketing, on the other hand, is probably the most useless part of this. I never once pickpocketed someone unless I just wanted to mess with a random NPC because they got angry with you and sometimes will fight you. The only time that this is useful is during narrative moments when it is necessary. Otherwise, there is no need. You'll make enough money as it is throughout the story of AC2. After going through this long ass segment of learning social stealth, Paola tells us that we need a suitable weapon for assassinating, a hidden blade, but since it's broken, we need to meet an individual we have already met before, Leonardo. Leonardo is such a likable character. He's very friendly, outgoing, spontaneous, ADHD-like, and he literally hugs Ezio whenever he sees him after a long time. If any of you never pressed the button prompt when this happens, you deserve to go to hell. Along with the hidden blade is a codex page on how the mechanism works. Speaking of codex pages, there is a whole collectathon with them after you meet Mario, Ezio's uncle. You're literally required to collect all of them in order to beat the game, and I hate this kind of mission structure even if it isn't hard to collect them all. I would have been so much better just to include the codex pages with the main missions, where after one mission Ezio just finds a codex page. It would have made much better sense. But regardless, when we meet with Leonardo, he tells us to wait a while so he can concentrate on deciphering the wording on the codex page. After Leonardo is done, he jokes with us by saying that he needs to cut off a finger in order for the hidden blade to work, a sort of sacrifice, but because the design was overhauled, the loss of the finger is no longer necessary. Leonardo also says that whenever we find another codex page, we need to bring it back to him, so sounds like a plan. After this, Leonardo gets jumped by a couple of guards, which leads us to test out the hidden blade and learn how the mechanism works. We assassinate the guard, save Leonardo, and then go on our way to meet with Paola. She tells us that since we have learned everything we needed to and fix the blade, all that's left is to take out Uberto, our first assassination in the game.
You!
You would have done the same to save the ones you love.
Yes, I would. And I have. The Auditore are not dead! I'm still here! Me! Ezio! Ezio Auditore!
After we have done the deed, Ezio blurts out that he isn't dead, the exact opposite of what the assassins are trained to do. They need to stay hidden and not announce themselves. This, once again, sets up a character arc for Ezio. Also, as we assassinate Uberto, he says that Ezio would have done the same if he were in his position. If you take a look at the note that was on his body, it's revealed that the Medici, another rich family, robbed Uberto of what he had owed. This causes Uberto to be scared about his family's future. When the Templars came to him and offered him money, land, and a title only if he joined them in taking out the Auditores, this this is why Alberto made the decision to betray his best friend. This type of story is very tragic. I just wish they wouldn't have hidden this away in a note that you have to access through the database in the main menu. They should have made this an actual narrative moment. This would have caused more emotional weight to the scene and may have possibly influenced Ezio as a person. Though I do understand that it would have affected the pacing and probably wouldn't have fit with the overall narrative. But our next objective is to get out of the city and go to Monteriggioni, where Ezio's Uncle Mario lives. But before that, Paula tells us that we need to have the city forget our face. This brings into light the notoriety system that has been massively overhauled from the previous game. Around the city, you'll see markers on your map for tearing down wanted posters, bribing heralds, and taking out messengers. You'll find yourself doing this a lot throughout the game if you're someone that isn't interested in stealth, but even then, stealth will sometimes make your notoriety increase. After this is when we escort Cloudy and Maria outside of the city. As you all know, I hate escort missions, but luckily this mission isn't hard since you don't battle enemies much in this section, but when we get to Monteriggioni is a different story. Vieri is here with his Pazzi men. I guess he knew where we were headed. Here you take on his henchmen, just slaughter all of them, no big deal, but then a second scene plays where arrows start flying. This is when we get introduced to Mario.
Don't you recognize me? It's me, Mario!
After you take out all of Vieri's men and meet with Mario, he takes you on a tour of Monteriggioni. On this tour, he tells us that Vieri and his men have always been attacking the villa on and off, sort of like a rivalry. It is also worth mentioning now that the villa is sort of a hub for Ezio. You can make passive income by renovating certain areas such as the blacksmith, tailor, bank, and so forth. And the more you upgrade the villa, the more passive money you'll make. You'll get certain discounts, and the villa will end up looking a lot more pretty. I love this sense of progression here. I always found myself going specifically to the villa in order to buy things since it has a discount. Not to mention there is certain weapons you can only get exclusively in the villa, such as Altair's sword. Overall, I found this mechanic very well made. It gave incentive to always come back to this place and see the progression you've made. Not to mention getting some easy money. The next order of business is to learn how to fight, essentially a real tutorial to combat. Ezio says that he can't do this because he's going to leave right away, but Mario persuades him into training anyway just in case he gets jumped while traveling. Here you learn your traditional quick step dodge, your counterattacks, and the not useful at all taunt mechanic. The quick step is so delayed when you're in battle, you have to time this at the right moment, but the problem is there is no right moment. You just have to press the button and pray that Ezio will just move out of the way. Though later on you get the hang of it and it gets better, it is still frustrating to master. The same goes for countering. With the later games in this series, after you successfully counter an enemy, you can chain that and quickly take out your enemies. Here it doesn't have that. You have to one at a time counter enemies, and even then it isn't a guaranteed counter kill. It makes you have to button mash the square button constantly, making the combat uninspired and boring, not even close to the level of Brotherhood in AC3. Like I said before, it makes me want to completely avoid combat in general. Taunts are completely useless because all it does is make the enemy attack you, and they already do that anyways. And when you do taunt an enemy, it's almost a for sure hit on their end, so there's no use in having it. With combat, you have a certain number of weapons you can use: the sword, axe, blunt weapons, the knife, and the hidden blade. You can buy different weapons at the blacksmith for different damage outputs, but in all honesty, I didn't see a difference in the damage output. Even with the best sword in the game, there's just no use in upgrading your weapons. The knife is essentially a quicker weapon to use than the sword. It is quicker to use, but takes longer to take out an enemy. I never really use this weapon. The hidden blade, along with being a stealth weapon, is also a combat weapon. I call this the cheese mechanic. Whenever you use it, it feels like you take out enemies much faster than any other weapon in the game, especially against brute soldiers. I just found myself using this in the sword for the majority of the game. Overall, combat is extremely lackluster, boring, and unrefined. It's almost punishing the player when they engage with it. So because of that, I usually ran away from fights and mostly just did stealth runs when I had the chance. Ezio's next destination though is in Tuscany. After Mario left Monteriggioni to hunt down the Pazzi, upset at Ezio felt the need to prove Mario wrong in a sense, that Ezio is willing to finish what his father started. This initiates a long mission where we have to battle multiple enemies in different waves, and to keep in mind the combat's not very good. Then after we have the opportunity to assassinate him, when Vieri's assassinated and Ezio tries to get a confession out of him, he doesn't get one. Instead, with Vieri's last words, he mocks Ezio. This causes Ezio to make a scene and essentially curse Vieri, even in death. After playing all of the Ezio games, I love this scene. It shows that Ezio still has some growth to do. Now, he is brash, arrogant, and doesn't understand what it means to be an assassin, but this changes when Uncle Mario approaches. He tells Ezio that he isn't Vieri, that he shouldn't become him. Though these words are few, they carry hefty weight, and because of this conversation, Ezio shows respect to every Templar he offs, which is a nice touch. After this, we head back to the villa to celebrate the victory that has been made. Mario tells us the name of the ominous figure, Rodrigo Borgia, the leader of the Templar order. After this though is a sort of long spiel of exposition that's only relevant to the next mission, so I'll save it until then. But now we learn about the wall of the codex pages that need deciphering by the likes of Leonardo da Vinci. I think I already covered the codex pages before, but just to say it briefly again, it's just a terrible collectathon. It isn't too hard, but it's really tedious. But the best side activity in the game, to a certain degree, and which I'll get to later, is the assassin tombs. If you collect all 6 of the seals, you get the armor of Altair, which is the best armor in the game. Not to mention, for this armor, you never have to go to a blacksmith and repair it. That alone is worth the effort to collect all of the seals. Also, to get full synchronization, you need to complete this. But the next point of business is to go back to Florence and see Leonardo so he can decipher an important codex page. This codex page contains different techniques to assassinate enemies. Here you get a tutorial on how to assassinate off of ledges. You can air assassinate someone from a hay bale. I have no idea why they waited this long into the story to teach us these techniques. I wish they just did this earlier, but I guess it makes sense in the overall narrative. Ezio needs to learn these things one at a time. If he learned it all at once, it wouldn't make that much sense. So in that case, I understand why they waited this long. And in all honesty, after getting these techniques, the game became much better. As we explore Florence a tad bit more as an older Ezio after his assassin training, we have a target of some thief. As we get close to him, a scene plays where he steals Ezio's money, taunts us, and runs away. This initiates a chase sequence that was entirely too easy. The guy was so slow, and all you have to do is tackle him. At this point, I don't know which is better or worse. Have a chase sequence that is extremely frustrating that involves parkour, or have a chase sequence that goes by quickly to the point where there was no need to have it in the first place. I think I'd rather have the latter in all honesty, but then again, that is subjective. But out of nowhere, a dude named La Volpe talks to us, saying that he knows everything in the city, including Ezio wanting to know where Francesco de Pazzi is. I will say, I do wish we had to just run into La Volpe directly. I really don't understand the need to have an unnecessary tailing mission so that a thief can lead us to La Volpe. I understand that this man is probably very high up and wants to not be in the open, but my point still stands. The story would not have suffered. La Volpe tells us that there is a caravan coming from Rome. That may be the place where Francesco is meeting other people. He tells us that he will lead us there. This causes another tutorial of sorts on parkour, even though we already had it. Maybe it's just getting the player more and more accustomed to it. Even then, I don't see the need. It feels like a way to pad out game time with the concealment of it being a tutorial. Maybe I just feel this way because, for one, I hate the parkour in this game, and two, I already know how to parkour because I've played this game countless times in my life. But this leads us to La Volpe saying we need to go through the catacombs of the city. This is an introduction to the assassin tombs I touched on previously. So with this, I'm going to go over them now. The assassin tombs, in my opinion, are necessary in order to get the most out of AC2. You get the armor of Altair, which is canon for Ezio to get. It also plays into the intro of AC Brotherhood. Going into the gameplay of these, I hate them, plain and simple. I don't hate them in the terms of it makes the game horrible. I hate them because of the broken nature of parkour. These assassin tombs rely heavily on that system. Majority of these tombs are built specifically for parkour. Here's a quick compilation of me raging at these fucking assassin tombs.
I'm gonna wait till it goes out. Oh my god, bro! Fuck! Wait, with this camera, dude, it's so bad. Fuck! This shit is so incredibly broken. It is the parkour in Assassin's Creed 2, to anyone who says it's good, you are fucking delusional. This shit is so broken to the point where when you push a direction on your controller, whatever you do on your joystick, it will not go that direction. It'll go to that direction about 60% of the time.
I will say, I am glad that I did them. Though it was frustrating, it helped me get more comfortable with this shit parkour system. But also, getting the Altair armor felt so good. I felt accomplished for going through hell and back. But after doing these, I will never go back to doing them if I ever replay this game. These assassin tombs are usually spread across all maps: Florence, Forli, Monteriggioni, and Venice. I don't believe there's one in Tuscany. It is a pretty easy progression in completing these. Whenever a marker became visible on the minimap, I immediately went to complete these tombs to get it over with. with. In these assassin tombs at the very end, you get a chunk of change from the chest, which is always nice to have. I'm not gonna complain. Overall, like I said before, it is kind of a need to complete these, but at the same time, it is connected to a system that is heavily flawed, so take that as you will. As we listen into the meeting La Volpe told us to tune into, we hear that the Templars are preparing for something. They got weapons for a lot of people in which the Pope gave support to as long as nobody's killed. Of course, the Templars aren't going to listen to that. It involves the Medici family, and everything is going to take place at the Duomo relatively soon. I love this angle of mystery behind the missions in this game. No information is given to you easily, at least for the most part. It's something that The Last of Us Part 2 should take some notes on. When we get to the Duomo the next day, we see Giuliano and Lorenzo Medici walking through the street. This causes Francesco to go up to Lorenzo and attack him, killing his brother and injuring Lorenzo. This causes a combat sequence of us protecting Lorenzo from incoming guards. After we defeat them all, an escort mission plays where we have to take Lorenzo to safety. Like I said before, I really don't like these, and given that a health bar is near the top right corner of the screen, it makes me hate it more. Thank God you don't really have to worry about your escorts since they can defend themselves well to a certain degree. Still though, I think missions that involve an urgency to protect a character from dying should be left in the past. I understand that this game was released in 2009, so there is some leniency here, but a game that releases now, if they do this, I just can't stand it. When we get Lorenzo to safety, he tells Ezio that he used to know his father, that he was a good and honest man. This hits hard in all honesty, even though we weren't even close to Giovanni in this game. I guess it's because we know how much it means to Ezio, therefore it means a lot to us since we're playing as him. I just found it cool and interesting, something to point out. Ezio then strikes a deal to help Lorenzo and his men take out Francesco, a common goal on both sides. This causes me to try to stealth my way to assassinate Francesco, but I fail because parkour is such an unpolished thing in this game. I just got detected because Ezio didn't do what I wanted him to do. It's so weird also because during this time Francesco jumped off the building into a hay bale, but I couldn't do that with him because I was detected, and enemies just kept hitting me and I couldn't move. So I just button mashed for way too long of a time. Combat starting at Brotherhood and on is just so much better than AC 1 and 2. It makes sense because the games became more refined as time went on, but when you do a retrospective on these games, my god is it a drag. We finally then assassinate Francesco. This is also the first confession sequence where Ezio does this iconic line, Requiescat in pace, which is rest in peace. Here, Ezio starts to grow more understanding. He starts to become the master assassin he soon will embody. I love this part of the story. I just get goosebumps. The craziest thing about this sequence though is when some civilians put Francesco in a noose and send him down a building to show the entire city with Ezio just hanging in the back. This scares the civilians and the other Templars. This part was so dark and interesting to where my eyes were just glued to the screen.
Francesco?
That was fun. I don't remember that. That's dark as shit, and I love it, dude.
I don't remember this from any other playthrough I've done, so this surprise of dark storytelling was just, wow. After we meet with Lorenzo again, he tells us a story of when he fell into a river, and he was drifting into an unknown place. When he awoke, he says his mother was crying with a figure smiling at him. It ended up being Ezio's father. This is how our friendship started between the two families. Knowing this backstory, although it is just filler exposition that doesn't matter too much, I found it pretty interesting. We didn't know much about Ezio's father, so knowing more now was a good thing. I just wish we had a game with Giovanni and what he was doing during his prime. After this interaction, Lorenzo gives us some names on Templars that are conspiring to take out Lorenzo. Not to mention these people were involved with the murder of Ezio's family. These people are Antonio Maffei, Archbishop Francesco Salviati, Stefano de Bignone, I think I fucking pronounced that right. I butchered it so hard. And Bernardo Baroncelli? Yeah, Bernardo Baroncelli. These Templars aren't the essential villains of the game, but they are important names for the next couple assassination missions that are combined. It is also important that Lorenzo gives us a codex page that gives us another combat upgrade, but we will get there eventually. When I was exploring the rest of Florence, I came across a Templar icon that you can engage with. Here it is essentially the same as the assassin tombs, except you don't get assassin seals or a reward if you do all of them. It's just a treasure room where you can get a decent amount of money. I only did these at the beginning hours of the game, towards the middle. In the end, if you upgrade the villa enough, you get wipe your ass money, so you really don't need to do the rest of these. So because of this, I won't talk about them anymore. They really aren't all that interesting unless you're a content whore and want as many hours in the game as possible. Shortly after, we meet with Leonardo again to decipher another codex page. Here you get the poison blade, which I never used, and I don't understand why it's in the game. If you're that close to an enemy, why not just use your hidden blade? Thankfully in Brotherhood they fixed this by making it a projectile, but here there's just no reason to have it or use it. But at least it gives us another tool to use, so I can't complain. This brings us back to the villa where we can talk to Mario. Ezio lets him know what happened in Florence with Jacopo and Francesco, but the more important thing is the codex page that we give to Mario. It states something about a prophet and 2 pieces of Eden. This is something extremely important to the narrative, in which we'll find out towards the end. Once again, I love the mystery that's being told here. They don't tell it to you right off the bat. You must leave it in the back of your mind and save it until the end, or wait until a hint is thrown at you. I will say the narrative in this game is saving grace. Once we get to Tuscany, there's an abundance of small missions, so I'm going to combine these into one summary. The names that were stated before when we were talking to Lorenzo are the people that are involved in this mission. One mission, we take out Antonio Maffei near a synchronization point in which not much was said in this confession. This small mission wasn't hard, like at all. You just have to climb, take out some guards, and then assassinate. Almost the same thing happens with Stefano, Francesco, at least with him you can control some mercenaries, and Bernardo. With Bernardo, I had some trouble.
My God! Move! Get the fuck out of the way, dude!
As you can see, these assassinations are all the same, with only slight variations, which I honestly thought was boring. Doing all these back to back was just a pain in the ass and felt like a checklist. This is no way to structure a mission, not to mention the ramifications of this, and the story is slim to none. They could have easily cut this out of the game, and no one would have batted an eye. It was just something to pad out game time and felt lazy in my eyes, and it's a shame. But after this, we finally get to the point of seeing what Jacopo is up to. This is just a tailing mission, and oh god, the PTSD I get from this back in my childhood of failing these constantly because I didn't know how to play the game well. And let me tell you, during this, I died so many times. I got caught so much to the point where I had to hold in my extreme rage. This game is very dated, so having these missions makes sense given the time period it was released in, but my fucking god. AC2 has horrible mission structure mostly because of this. The AI is terrible, you get caught sometimes almost instantly, the parkour sometimes dicks you into getting detected, and sometimes you just get detected out of nowhere. There was even one point where I sent in some thieves to distract some guards, and they didn't distract all the guards like they usually do. They just distracted one. Even the thieves were having trouble with the parkour system. When we actually complete the tailing mission, we witness Rodrigo Borgia assassinate Jacopo himself because he thinks that all of this was Jacopo's fault. But Rodrigo, him being smart, knows that we're near eavesdropping and sends some guards on us while Jacopo bleeds out. This causes Ezio to fight off the guards, got to Jacopo and end his suffering, and then we go on our way. After taking out all the Pazzi, we meet with Lorenzo once more and tell him the news. After telling, we find out our next destination as well as a gift. We must go to Venice, which is probably the best city in the game in my opinion. It's either that or Florence, but Lorenzo also gives us a cool cape. If we put it on, we are in Florence, we'll no longer gain notoriety. We will permanently be anonymous. This is extremely useful later in the game when you come back to Florence, as well if you just want to mess around in free roam. As we make our way to Venice, Ezio must go through mountains first, and along the way we surprisingly meet with Leonardo once more, who's stranded on the side of the road because a wheel became stuck on his carriage. In the back of his carriage you see a certain mechanism that we use later in the game, and let me tell you, that thing is fun and extremely frustrating. So this is a mission in and of itself. Ezio tells Leonardo that he'll travel with him to Venice, but along the way some Templars ambush Ezio and Leonardo. This causes an on-the-rails running away sequence. I mean, it was okay. There was no difficult element to it, you just have to run away and swerve side to side to keep enemies from car surfing on the carriage. But this brings us to Forli, a place to stop before we take a ride to Venice. When we meet with Leonardo and talk to him, the captain asks for our pass. Ezio of course doesn't have one, but at the right time, a woman calls out for us for help. This woman is stranded on a piece of land with water all around her, and I have absolutely no idea how she even got there. This is just a case of accepting the fact that she's there and going through with the mission, so of course we do that. When we rescue this woman, she says that we need a suitable reward for saving her. This is most definitely a coincidence that never needed to be there, but oh well. At least this game doesn't take itself too seriously like The Last of Us does. The woman talks to the captain, which then he lets us on board. When talking to Leonardo, he tells us that the woman we rescued is an extremely important person at Forli. This is Caterina Sforza. We will see her later when we cover like the DLC in this game, and let me tell you now, I hate the DLC with all my heart and soul, except for the end, because there was a speech and that speech is dope. Soon after, we get ripped out of the Animus and play as Desmond again. Here you get some shit from Sean, learn why being the Animus for a long time can affect your health, and you just dick around the warehouse while at the same time getting exposition from Lucy. Apparently, we have to activate the warehouse defense system so when the Templars and Abstergo do eventually come, we'll be ready. Sounds simple enough. In playing as Desmond, all you must do is parkour, turn some knobs, and that's it. I do wish there was more stuff to do in the modern day, but I guess we all don't get what we ask for. It reminds me of Christmas a couple years back when I only got some black socks. Going back to the exposition though, while you're parkouring around and turning the knobs, you start to understand the bleeding effect. This is when your time in the Animus starts to reflect in the real world. This can be seeing visions of your time in the Animus, learning skills from ancestors, and so forth. And during this time, we start to see visions only briefly. The visions consist of guards walking around. Lucy reassures us that if these hallucinations only last for a couple of seconds, then we're fine. Okay. But as we're heading back to the Animus, we start to hallucinate for a longer period of time, specifically regarding Templars back in AC1. This causes a transition of us playing as Altair again, even though we aren't in the Animus. Even Desmond comments on this. I found this pretty sweet. I always thought that Altair was the most badass assassin, so playing as him again, even if briefly, was a great time. During this section, it's essentially only a tailing mission that isn't too hard at all. You just chase a Templar until she goes into her tower, and as Altair, you climb it, meet the Templar again, and clap some cheeks. Desmond's tripped out by this as well, but this reveals something interesting. This is essentially just a visual representation of DNA being passed down, because when the clapping of the cheeks stops, we don't follow Altair anymore. We stay put with the woman, meaning she's pregnant, essentially showing the lineage passed down by Altair then leading to Ezio. Now, I'm not familiar with canon, so I'm not sure if Ezio is from Desmond's father's side or mother's side, so seeing the lineage passed down may have been retconned later. When we get back into the Animus, we get sent to Venice in 1481. It is important to mention the time jumps. I do believe that Ezio's journey in AC2 ends in 1499. And why is this important? Because it shows the growth of his character, his dedication to the Brotherhood, and a certain plot point that you'll see later. We then meet with Leonardo again. Out of nowhere, someone comes out and greets us both and takes us on a tour throughout Venice. Here you just see the corruption that's been going on in the city. Guards extorting merchants, beating up random civilians. We also get to see some thieves that bump into Ezio. Keep in mind that we'll meet these thieves later in the story. We also get to see the Palazzo della Seta. This is home to Emilio Barbarigo, the person that oversees Venice. This will be an assassination target later on in the story. Although this little tour of Venice is long and not needed, I did appreciate the sights to behold and the description of everything. I think they put this exposition dump here so they didn't have to do it for the rest of your time in Venice, because keep in mind, Ezio's time in Venice within the game is rather long. I'd rather have the exposition dump be here in the beginning when you're first interested in the city rather than during the middle where you start to get tired and tend not to listen to the exposition. After our time with the tour, we make our way to Leonardo's new workshop where we can find him if we need to deliver more codex pages. After spending time with Leonardo and making our way through another Templar vase to get more moolah, we get our next mission. Here, Ezio takes a quick look at the wall of the Palazzo della Seta. We notice that there's a huge gap of brick that prevents us from scaling that said wall, but out of nowhere, we see some thieves make their way past some guards, distracting them, while the woman who bumped into us earlier scales the wall with ease, literally jumping that gap. She then takes an arrow to the knee.
I used to be an adventurer like you.
So now our mission is to take the hot thief, try to get her to safety while battling some enemies, which is annoying, then get her on a boat and take out some archers while simultaneously doing parkour. I absolutely despise this mission for a multitude of reasons. One, the chick constantly bitches at you to protect her even though you're doing just that, and I swear it's like every 30 seconds. Two, I really don't like escort missions, as you guys know. Three, when the characters are on the boat, it literally takes ages to get to their destination. You must constantly battle with the unpredictable parkour system while simultaneously stealth killing enemies. It just sucks, and I wish the mission was a hell of a lot simpler. There was no need to add these multiple steps. It should have just been a simple mission where we escort the woman to her base and that's that. No parkour, no boat sequence that takes 10 hours, just something simple. After finally completing the boat section of the mission, we carry the woman and set her down on a table. This causes a man named Antonio to come out and help the woman with her injury. I found this part hilarious because the woman bitches at Antonio and the dude just takes it like he's her husband of 20 years. We also get to learn this woman's name. Rosa. As we embark on our next series of missions, we meet with Antonio first. When we make our way to his place, he offers us some coffee, in which Ezio is very curious about. Keep in mind, during this time is when coffee started to be mass exported to different countries, so seeing this in game and Ezio saying coffee sucks without sugar is pretty funny. Here's when Antonio offers an alliance since we're after the same goal. Take down Emilio. This causes a multitude of smaller missions that are admittedly boring. One is us sweet-talking Rose and learning how to jump gaps when parkouring. Another is just assassinating different thieves who betrayed Antonio. And then another mission with Rose that includes parkour with jumping gaps, but this time it's timed. Then finally we have to save some thieves and then bring them back to this one dude. So why do I not like these? They all involve mechanics that I don't like, as well as they are very little in the narrative department. None of this progresses the game from a narrative standpoint. It's just filler missions. I don't want to climb buildings while being timed. I don't want to wait 5 minutes for some thieves to follow me on rooftops only for a couple of them to be dumb and fall into some water. That was the stupidest thing I've ever seen. I don't want to assassinate random people that I don't give a shit about. It just feels like random side missions you find in AC Odyssey. I'm glad that later in the Venice section things get better, but for now, the shit's kind of boring. This includes the next missions where it feels like a checklist. We have to go around the map and loot 3 different chests in order to get some armor out of it so some thieves can imitate as guards. And each time you loot a chest, there's some good chance that you'll engage in some combat with about a dozen guards. If this was AC Brotherhood, this would have been no problem whatsoever, but because AC2 is very bare bones in the combat department, it sucks. So you're forced to run away the majority of the time, unless you want to waste about 10 minutes of your time mashing the square button. At least after you finish this, you just have to jack a boat and row it to the designated spot, no big deal there. So with all these missions, the bottom line is, it's so incredibly boring. Also, want to see me rage at the game because they blocked off a certain part of the map for no reason because a mission was going to take place there? Yeah, that shit happened. I was trying to decrease my notoriety by chasing down a dude, and since the parkour is so trash, and Ezio sticks to literally every surface imaginable, I was fucked and I was incredibly mad.
Oh my god! Stop, game! Stop! Please stop! Holy fuck! Oh my god!
Regardless, since we have done all of these tasks Antonia asked us to do, we now have to assassinate all of the archers surrounding Palazzo della Seta in order for the thieves to take their place and disguise themselves. This brings us the opportunity to assassinate Emilio. I just snuck around the rooftops and took out some archers, absolutely failed to air assassinate him, so I chased him around the place until I eventually took him out. I very much wish the series of events in order to take this guy out would be better. Also, now that I think about it, I have no emotional connection to these guys that I'm assassinating. In AC Brotherhood, you had a reason to care. Same as AC3. Assassin's Creed fails a lot at the caring for multiple villains department. I'm not asking to make every single assassination target to have some sort of meaning behind them. I'm just saying at least have it be the majority of them. So after we assassinate this dude, the thieves take over the building while Ezio gets his next piece of information, which causes him to leave ASAP. The next order of business after taking out Emilio is a tailing mission. After tailing these 2 individuals for quite a while, we come to a stop and a cutscene plays. A couple more individuals meet with the 2 and they reveal that Ezio has offed Emilio, which has the Templars that are talking scared. This causes them to all walk away and we need to tail them again. And during this whole damn time, the bars on the street kept getting in my face. It was so damn obnoxious that I was starting to rage. There's absolutely no need to have this many come up to you during a tailing mission where staying stealth is necessary. Like, my god. Not to mention there are these NPCs carrying boxes, and in this one place there was like 5 of them coming through the same corridor that I was going through. I accidentally body checked one of the dudes and he dropped his box and broke it. And this had a domino effect which made every dude with a box to drop and break it, and this had me fucking detected. Are you kidding me? Anyways, enough raging. Before that though, the group of Templars meet with Rodrigo Borgia, who is in town. The Templars plan to kill the current Doge and replace him with the Catholic Santa. So this causes a sense of urgency for Ezio to stop this as soon as possible. And knowing this information, Ezio goes to warn Antonio. This causes a mission where Antonio walks with us to scout out the place. 2 of the entryways are blocked off because either 1, it is guarded, or 2, you aren't able to climb. After concluding that the place is impenetrable, Antonio says the word birds. This causes Ezio to remember the mechanism that Leonardo was working on. Remember when I said that I didn't like this mission too much? Well, let's get into that. At first, you get a tutorial on how this thing is going to work, but come to find out, you can't go very far because there's no fire to thrust you into the air. The tutorial itself is fine, but to have a tutorial that doesn't involve the fire is odd to me. Adding that has a different layer to the mission with a new control scheme, so to speak. And because of this, when the mission inevitably starts, you're bound to fail a couple of times because you haven't had the necessary learning sequence for it. It's just ridiculous. Not to mention when you actually do the mission, fire is like everywhere with no set in stone linear way to complete the mission. So with that, you have to find your own way to the objective, and this causes trial and error, resulting in needless deaths with the mission. Don't get me wrong, the set piece is nice, but just the way this whole thing was formatted is bad. Regardless, the next order of business is to sneak into the building, warn the current doge about the plot against him, and assassinate the other dude. When we do eventually get there, a cutscene plays of the doge taking a sip of poison. Essentially, he's already dead, and this causes Ezio to chase after Carlo. When we do kill him, his confession results in talking about how Ezio kills for the betterment of other people, not for his own gain. That is the difference between the Templars and Assassins. And after this, we must run away and become anonymous. Also, after we do this mission, we finally get the Armor of Altair, which is pretty sick. We then meet with Leonardo. Leonardo has heard rumors that Ezio has killed the Doge. Here I'm confused because in the last scene before this, we heard the Doge say he killed me, right after Ezio assassinated Carlo. So was the Doge talking about Ezio here? If that's the case, that makes no sense whatsoever because Ezio clearly told the Doge that he was trying to save him, but he was too late. But now that I'm thinking about it, the guards probably walked in with the Doge dead and the other person dead, Carlo. So they probably put two and two together, thought Ezio killed the Doge. So just take away that entire sentence. We give Leonardo another codex page and it appears to be blueprints for a wrist gun, a staple of Ezio's Assassin's Creed games. The aiming feels quite normal, although it is loud, it can take out an enemy quickly. I usually found myself using throwing knives though, mostly because they're quieter and align more with stealth gameplay, and also, even though the aiming is good, the aiming takes a long time for the gun. But we then meet with Antonio with the mask on her face. This interaction was so funny because when you do meet with Antonio, he can't tell who you are because you have a mask on, but you have an assassin robe on. Video game logic. But for some reason, some random dude murders a courtesan. This game has a lot of random events happen within the main missions that make absolutely no sense. I guess it's just the Assassin's Creed charm, but I found myself rolling my eyes whenever this happens. All you do here is chase the dude down and assassinate him. And to make it even worse, when he come back, Antonio just becomes a piece of shit out of nowhere, and Ezio just ignores it. He tells us that wherever we go, trouble follows. Then Ezio just completely dodges this by saying, "I trust you know why I'm here." What? But fast forwarding the dialogue, we find out that Barbarigo never leaves the palazzo, except for this certain night. Since there's a huge festival happening, he will be out socializing. Also, in order to get into the VIP party inside the palazzo, we need the golden mask in which we can win in a series of minigames. These minigames are very fun in all honesty, no joke. These involve getting ribbons from women under a certain time limit, play capture the flag, which I absolutely whooped the AI's ass, a time trial that involves parkour, and a fighting ring that ultimately ends in death for people because Barbarigo doesn't want us to get the golden mask. The reason I love this so much is because of the ambience of the festival. Everything is so lively, it feels and looks fun, and the minigames helped the game as sort of a break from all the assassinations and understanding Templar secrets. It was just a nice switch up of pace and benefited the game greatly. And going back to the narrative, all of those minigames were for nothing in the end. Ezio ended up getting cheated out of the golden mask even though we demolished every game that was available. This causes us to meet our target out in the open and use some courtesans to help us blend in with the crowd. Using this to our advantage, we pickpocket the dude and finally get her golden mask. We can now blend in with the party that's happening at the palazzo and assassinate the Doge. Things get weird though when we're at the party. Since we pickpocketed the dude, he busts into the party with some guards trying to look for us. This causes a timer to start. Here you have to stay hidden. That was so stupid in my eyes. You literally blend in with the crowd for just a minute, and that's it. It just felt like 1 minute was wasted in my life. There was no need for it. But after the timer's up, the Doge comes out. Here you're technically supposed to use the gun that was given to you previously, but my dumbass just went up to him and assassinated him. Overall, I found this whole thing to have some serious upsides and serious downsides. There's way too many WTF moments during the missions, such as the unnecessary 1 minute countdown, Antonio being a dick for no reason, the way too easy pickpocketing mission, but the whole festival nature of these missions was so good. The ambience, the minigames, the crowds bustling, listening to music, everything about that was peak. I just wish they capitalized more on this set piece with better mission design and story elements. Best part for Ezio about all of this is he gets to clap some cheeks at the end of it. But the festivities only last that night. Soon after we meet with Antonio again, he states that Silvio Barbarigo fled to L'Arsenal, so in order to raise our own mercenary army and take him down, we have to meet another character, Bartolomeo. Problem is, the dude has been imprisoned and we have to break him out. Bartolomeo is your typical frat boy character who's super masculine, funny as hell, and is always wanting to fight head on. So after we set this dude free, we have another escort mission where we have to fight countless enemies until we eventually get to Bartolomeo's place. Here, he's worried about someone named Bianca, and Bianca's a sword. I love this dude so much. These characters within the world of Assassin's Creed are very diverse. You never see two characters who act the same. It's a shame most games today fall into that trap. Bartolomeo then gives us a rundown on what to do. He's going to get his mercenaries round up and gather an army while Ezio goes to save his other men that have been captured. This causes yet again another mission structure that feels like a checklist. You have to free mercenaries from one place, then go to the next, and then go to the next. It's very unoriginal and boring, but that's what you get when you play these old games, unfortunately. Then, of course, like with most missions in this game, it gets worse. The very next mission consists of doing the exact same thing, but instead of breaking mercenaries out of jail, you have to place them at certain points throughout the city after defeating some guards. These missions aren't bad by any means, it's just there isn't a lot to talk about here. The missions are boring and uninspiring. Yeah, sure, the narrative is interesting, but that doesn't automatically make a game a masterpiece. There are other pieces to the puzzle, and in Assassin's Creed's case, literally everything other than the narrative has some boring nature or jank to it. But this finally brings us to assassinating Dante and Silvio. Here you have to climb a tower and set off a firework to signal the mercenaries to fight. When the alarm has been set off, Ezio and the rest of the mercenaries fight Dante and Silvio, along with their men. You just get one dude's health down just enough to trigger a cutscene. After this, Dante and Silvio try to book it toward a boat. This causes a chase sequence that mostly involves parkour in order to catch up to them. You're technically supposed to double assassinate them, but I messed up and had to do it one at a time. Here at the confession though is the first time we actually get a confession. This thing was so weird though, they just willfully give us information about where their destination was without much interrogation, but it's Assassin's Creed. You can't take it too seriously like you would with other games. One of the dudes tells us that the destination that they were going to was Cyprus, but that is all that was said because before he could finish the sentence he passes away. The year then transitions to 1488 on Ezio's birthday, 10 years since the death of his father and brothers. Ezio gives a speech of sorts to Rosa on how he's close to the end of things, but he isn't close to understanding what all of it was for. But all of a sudden Leonardo cockblocks us and tells us that he wants to speak. Leonardo starts to talk about how he was deciphering the codex pages that we brought to him. They end up roughly translating to, "The prophet will appear when the second piece is brought to the floating city." Starting to understand the mystery that's coming together, Ezio comes clean with Leonardo about what exactly is going on. He tells Leonardo that an ancient prophecy is hidden in the codex pages. That prophecy leads to a vault that holds something of extreme power. The two pieces of Eden that Ezio mentions is of course the Apple of Eden and the Papal Staff. The staff is something that will come to fruition later. The whole reason the two dudes were trying to cause the distraction was so they can sail to Cyprus in order to find the Apple of Eden, and then bring it back to Venice to give to Rodrigo. And the reason why they're giving the apple to him is because he thinks he is the prophet. We'll get to that plot point very soon. This is what I love about Assassin's Creed, the mysterious nature behind everything, stuff that goes far beyond human comprehension there in this time period, and it's a nice change of pace from the game I usually play. After coming off of The Last of Us Part 2, it was very depressing in all honesty, but playing this game got me set straight. I was interested, engaged, and I wanted to understand more about the mystery being uncovered. All of this causes Ezio to understand that Rodrigo will be in Venice very soon, and it's up to him to take him out as well as take the apple. But when scouting ahead to plan out his next moves, Ezio spots his Uncle Mario doing the exact same thing, which means Ezio isn't the only one that knows of Rodrigo's plans. Going forward, our mission now is to disguise ourselves as a guard. We have the way too long of a tailing mission that I'm way too tired of at this point. We have to assassinate that said guard and take his clothing, pick up the apple, and pretend to deliver it to Rodrigo. Then at the end, we confront him and fight him and his guards along with Mario, La Volpe, Antonio, and Bartolomeo, who spots us. You can now understand that all of these people were assassins all along, helping Ezio on his journey. After we get done with the boring battle, the apple stays with us while Rodrigo escapes.
Lashea waka unutlak bel kulun munkin. These are the words spoken by our ancestors that lay at the heart of our creed.
Where other men blindly follow the truth, remember,
Nothing is true.
where other men are limited by morality or law, remember,
Everything
is permitted.
I love this cutscene so much even to this day. It gives me goosebumps. After being with Ezio all this time, 10 years, so much mystery, pain, failures, and successes, Ezio finally becomes an assassin, inducted to the Brotherhood. The scene overall is just powerful. It gives you an overwhelming sense of accomplishment. It is something I wish I could relive all over again in 2009. But with that, Ezio does a leap of faith into the water. So here's when we talk about the AC2 DLC that was shoehorned into the story towards the ending that in all honesty throws the pacing off to a staggering degree. Because of this, I'm going to breeze by this as quickly as possible, mostly just saying what I like and didn't like about it. So just to give a brief summary about what the DLC is about, it takes place in Forli directly after Ezio gets the apple. You get closer to Caterina Sforza as well as Machiavelli, who is a new character and plays a more prevalent role in the sequel. This DLC is full of bugs, horrible mission design, and the story it tells isn't important at all to the overall narrative. In the initial first mission of the game where you accompany Caterina and Machiavelli into Forli, I had a soft lock glitch. I had to restart the entire mission because of it, but thankfully this was the only time that this happened in the game. It just sucks that a game made in 2009 still has bugs like this. And I guess the whole main reason that Ezio's in Forli in the first place is to hide the apple there. Why? Why not hide it in the catacombs of Monteriggioni or something? I mean, the whole plot of this DLC is weird and not needed. Like I said, it feels shoehorned in and sucks that you're required to play through it if you have the Ezio collection. Going through the DLC, the mission structure is this: tailing missions, assassinations that are unoriginal and happen way too often, escort missions, and missions that involve saving people you don't care about. The villains in this DLC are also uninteresting. You barely spend time with any of them, like at all. The twins only have about a couple of sentences of dialogue through the DLC, same with the monk. He only has, and I swear, a couple of lines of dialogue, and I swear to you, I can't even remember their names while writing this script. You have no reason to care about them. They try to get you to care about taking the twins out because, for one, Caterina's children got snatched by them, and two, I guess Caterina fucked up and gave the apple to one of them? What? Why did Ezio absolutely need to give the apple to Caterina in the first place? Couldn't he have just kept it on himself like he did after this DLC? It's so stupid. And to make matters worse, after you assassinate the final Orsi brother and get the apple back, you lose it again to some random ass monk. You see what I mean when I say that just sucks the pacing right out of the game? If they made this DLC totally optional, I would have no problem with it and I wouldn't have been as hard on it. But since it's required to play through in order to beat the game, I have to treat it as if it's part of the base game, connecting with pacing, narrative, mission design, and combat encounters, and so forth. All the progress of the game is now going to be significantly decreased because of my horrible time playing this required DLC. So after we interrogate some monks and understand who the person was that stole the apple, we make our way back to Florence, in which for some reason the color was just sucked out of. The saturation was just turned down significantly in order to convey that the city's depressed, and I hate this. It made it so the game looked foggy, low texture, and dull. But now here's the fun part where the fun gets sucked out of everything. In order to get the person who has the apple out of hiding, we have to assassinate 9 of his lieutenants. Fucking 9. At the beginning of assassinating these 9 people, there was an annoying as hell glitch where even then, when you were anonymous, guards would still go aggro, even when you weren't near them. Instead of writing it out and telling you how frustrated I was, how about I just show you? Probably the best part about this DLC though is the speech that Ezio gives at the end. You heard the entire thing at the beginning of the video. This whole thing actually gave me goosebumps. Ezio now has an understanding of what he is and has come to terms with the death of his father and brothers. He understands what the assassins are fighting for. Free will, to have the ability to choose, whether it's good or evil is up to you. No man should have absolute control over someone else. Ezio even states that these people shouldn't follow him for only he is a man, that the only way to find the answers of life is to walk your own path. It was a perfect ending. Unfortunately, it's soured by the whack-ass DLC. But finally we get back to the main plot. After we get all the codex pages and have Leonardo decipher them, we talk to Mario. We get the apple, and our main objective now is to rearrange the codex pages until they show a map of the entire world. Ezio then finds out that the vault that has been talked about through the entire game is in Rome, and this is why Rodrigo, through the game, has been aiming to get the seat of the Pope. This causes him to wield the Isu artifact, the staff. The staff is one of 2 pieces of Eden needed to open the vault. That's why Rodrigo's been after the apple this whole time. But since Ezio's the real prophet, and since we need to take out Rodrigo, our next destination is Rome. Although the DLC ruined the pacing of the game, jumping back into the real narrative was pretty easy. Maybe it was just because the DLC's narrative was so god-awful, so when I transitioned to the real game, it felt like a breath of fresh air. Also, it's probably because it's the height of the story and we're almost done, so yeah. While we're in Rome, we have to parkour, engage in shitty combat, and stealth our way through various environments. The shittiest part about this sequence was when you had to parkour up a scout building and then fall on a horse and then do the same over again about 2 other times. Yeah, that sucked. But we eventually get to the part where we can assassinate Rodrigo, the new pope. But this assassination attempt fails. Rodrigo uses the staff to stun Ezio, and after a standoff, Ezio pulls out the apple and duplicates himself. These duplications actually help in combat to a certain degree, which is pretty sick. The cool ends though, because when we engage into the boss fight of sorts, you literally just mash the square button. That's it. After about 9 hours of mashing the square button, we finally take out Rodrigo, but before we can do anything, the man stuns us again using the staff. When this happens, Ezio's stuck on the ground with the apple just there. This causes Rodrigo to grab the apple and make his way to the temple. But because Rodrigo isn't the real prophet, the door doesn't open for him. So while he's still here at the door, Ezio meets him and challenges him to a good old-fashioned fist fight. During the boss fight, Rodrigo drops some hints to what could possibly lie within the vault. He says that God is within, which is kind of true. After we beat the dude's ass, we actually get to see what's inside. Oh, and by the way, Ezio spares Rodrigo. When I first beat this game, I really didn't like that Ezio spared the dude, but in all honesty, it makes sense from a historical standpoint. Rodrigo Borgia died in 1503 from poisoning, so I guess you kind of want to stay true to history. Regardless, back to what is behind the vaults.
Greetings, Prophet. It is good you have come. Let us see it, to give thanks. We must speak.
Who are you?
Many names. When I died, it was Minerva. Before that, Merva and Mera, and on and on. The others, too. Juno, who was before called Uni. Jupiter, who was before called Tinia.
You are gods.
No, not gods. We simply came before. Even when we walked the world, your kind struggled to understand our existence. We were more advanced in time. Your minds were not yet ready. Still not. Maybe never. No matter. You may not comprehend us, but you will comprehend our warning. You must.
None of what you are saying makes sense.
Our words are not meant for you.
What are you talking about? There's no one else here.
Enough. I do not wish to speak with you, but through you. You are the prophet. You've played your part. You anchor him, but please be silent, that we may commune. Listen. When we were still flesh and our home still whole, your kind betrayed us. We who made you. We who gave you life. We were strong, but you were many, and both of us craved war. So busy were we with earthly concerns, we failed to notice the heavens. And by the time we did, the world burned until naught remained but ash. It should have ended then and there. But we built you in our own image. We built you to survive. And so we did. Few were our numbers, your kind and mine. It took sacrifice, strength, compassion. But we rebuilt. And as life returned to the world, we endeavored to ensure this tragedy would not be repeated. But now we are dying, and time will work against us. Truth turned into myth and legend. What we built, misunderstood. Let my words preserve the message and make a record of our loss. But let my words also bring hope. You must find the other temples. built by those who knew to turn away from war. They worked to protect us, to save us from the fire. If you can find them, if their work can be saved, so too might this world. Be quick, for time grows short, and guard against the cross, for there are many who will stand in your way. It is done. The message is delivered. We are gone now from this world. All of us. We can do no more. The rest is up to you, Desmond.
What? Who is Desmond? I don't understand. Please, wait. I have so many questions.
I love this shit. Throughout the entirety of the first game, it was all about finding the Apple of Eden with the battle between Assassins and Templars. There was no ancient race, no disastrous event, none of that, so seeing it here adds so many more questions to the mix. It was a perfect ending to the game in my eyes, and to go over it briefly, we understand that Ezio was only meant to be a vessel for Desmond to hear the message. This message was brought from an ancient race known as the Isu. These Isu, as we figure out in later games, are more advanced people in which common humans mistook for gods, hence the names Jupiter, Minerva, Juno, and in later games, Odin, Loki, Tyr, Hades, and others. So, this Isu person that talked through Ezio to Desmond warned him of what is to come in the world, the same ending that happened to them, and rightfully so. Desmond says, "What the fuck?" This is the end of Ezio until we make it to Brotherhood. The next sequence that happens is a playable credit roll, where Desmond, Lucy, Rebecca, and Sean pack their shit and try to leave because Abstergo's found them. As Desmond, we fight loads of Abstergo agents. Warren Vidic is also here. We need to take him out, but unfortunately he escapes. And this is the end of the game. Overall, the story of AC2 was a fun ride, seeing the birth of Ezio, all the way to the end where he came to terms with his father and brother's death. From someone who had no idea who the assassins were, to becoming a deadly one. The one thing that had me hooked throughout this entire game would be the mystery. As I've said before, understanding what exactly the Apple of Eden was, understanding what Subject 16 was trying to tell us, who exactly are the ones who came before. During the time of this game's release, it was a masterpiece, no doubt. It set the tone for the rest of the series and created one of the most iconic characters of all time. This game was a pillar in the gaming world and should be treated like one. But how did I like my time playing it in 2023? Well, it was a game. I don't think this game is worth going through again. This extremely aged combat, the incredibly janky parkour, poor mission structure, and very bad DLC that's required to complete the game, I'd rather just watch a playthrough on YouTube or watch a video like this. The other Ezio games in this series are objectively miles better. Brotherhood improved on the combat tremendously and narrowed down the setting to one city to make things more streamlined. Revelations overhauled the parkour with the hook blade to make things less janky, and the other two games in this series are just more worth your time. Really, the only thing that AC2 has going for it is its incredible and interesting story. If that's mostly what you look for in games, then yeah, go ahead and play this game. It's great. But if you're someone that wants everything to be as good as it can be, play the others. In all honesty, I think this game is the one that needs the remake. Not AC1, but one can only dream. Anyways, thank you for watching, guys. I plan on making this new series where instead on grading old games on if they're masterpieces, I'm going to just grade it on if it's worth going back and playing. The Masterpiece series will mostly be for games that, well, were considered masterpieces. You could make the argument that AC2 is in that conversation, but since the game's old, I thought I would just put it in here. I plan on doing all of the Assassin's Creed games this year, so stay in the loop for that. I think the next game I'm going to cover will be Halo 2, then after, I'll possibly do Hogwarts Legacy, but we'll see. Once again, thank you for the support, everyone. I'll see you in another week or two. Go ahead and follow my Twitch and socials to stay up to date on everything. They will be in the description below. See you later, homies.